joining me in the studio is Toya Smith, a community activist working with the annual African Reparations March here in London. So Toya, thanks for joining us today. I think we should just dive straight in. What can you tell us about the history of slavery in Britain and the need for reparations?
Well, as a lot of people might know, after watching the Britain's Forgotten Slave Owners, they saw that Britain in 1833, they passed the Emancipation Act, stating that Africans were not human beings, and which is why it was okay to treat Africans the way they did. And alongside of, they didn't just take Africans from Africa and bring them over to enslave. It wasn't just enslavement, it was actually a process of dehumanization. It was the complete wiping of someone's sovereignty, nationhood, names, culture, language, everything was completely taken away, and they were literally broken and destroyed. So their whole inner spirit of who they were had been lost. For example, my surname is Smith. That's as an example. Do I look like a Smith? So alongside with that, you know, why it's important to present day is because you can see direct links as to why it's still, you can still see very obvious legacies of slavery still today. For example, the names, for example, you know, people not really knowing where they come from, who they are, you know, the bleaching of the skin. You know, we can go on for days about, you know, people trying to hide who they are, trying to hide their identity. It could be their hair, could be so many different things. So we can still see the present effects of slavery, even looking at Africa as a continent within itself. What African actually owns any part of Africa? So in itself, you know, that's I'd say one of the biggest legacies of the transatlantic slave trade as well. And it was very different to other slavery practices. I know a lot of people say, oh, you know, for example, Africans enslaved themselves. In those days, people did enslave themselves, but it was nowhere to the degree of where people were being dehumanized, whipped, brainwashed. And with that system of slavery, it was more to do with prisoners of war. And after a while, they would be freed. You know, they'd still keep their names and they'd still have their dignity. And that's not what's happened in regards to what the Europeans have done within actually internationalizing it, and slavery actually being the foundation of many of European nations of today.
So let me jump in now. When we talk about reparations, I know the first thing that comes to a lot of minds is finance and money and compensating people financially for that. Is there more to it than that, or is it really just about the money?
Oh, it's definitely not about the money. The compensation is only according to the UN framework of reparations, even though a lot of people don't agree with the UN, but you know, it's something that they've adopted. It's just an example. They've used compensation as the second. For what it is, there's 5 key strands of reparations, one being restitution, and that's restoring people back to what they would have been like, or how things would have been if the atrocity didn't happen. The second is compensation. The third is rehabilitation. That's to do with you know, psychology, like people's mindset, because you know, if anyone's not sure, we're 7 times more likely to be put in mental institutions and things like that. Fourth is satisfaction. Are we satisfied with the reparations that we've got? And the fifth one is guarantees of non-repetition. So yes, there is a huge misunderstanding about reparations, thinking it's just about money. It's not about money. Yeah. It's about forms of repair. Even according to the Oxford Dictionary, it says the act of restoring something back to its former or proper state.
So let me just jump in really quickly because we're running short on time. But so David Cameron, when he was asked to sort of address this issue, he said we need to look forward and not look back. And as someone who's fighting in this movement, what does that statement say to you, and how does it make you feel? I'm
not surprised really. Someone from David Cameron who's reaped the benefits of his forefathers, who's one of the richest, you know, we see him in his car, he's not living like any of us. None of his people, his establishment are not suffering like the rest of us. His whole bloodline, his whole lineage is off the blood of tears and sweat of Africans, so it's easy for him to say. And when English people do say things like, oh, just move on from the past, you know, it's only when it suits them, because when they want to dig up bones of the kings underneath car parks and rebury them in a burial 400 years later, it's okay. But when it's about reminding them about the things they've done wrong, it's, oh, be quiet, oh, move on. And they feel that they have the right to tell African people how they should feel about something. And a lot of us feel suppressed about not, a lot of us feel suppressed about our views. You know, we feel like we don't feel free to express our views because we're always shut down. But I always tell the public and, you know, the people I speak to, you know, speak loud and clear, you know, study your history, know what you're doing, know why you're doing this, look to the future as well, because it's not just, it isn't just about looking at the past, it is about looking forward for solutions, but we have to study the past to understand why we're in the future.
So how valuable would an admission of guilt and an apology be to you?
Well, an apology wouldn't do anything. What we do because we have an annual reparations march on the 1st of August in Brixton at 11 a.m. Everyone book your days off work. It will be a Monday this year. We're here to make public solidarity, public protest demonstration, showing the world that this is not going to disappear. And yeah, at the end of the day, sorry, I've gone off track there.
It's okay, we're actually running out of time, but it's a very interesting discussion. And like you said, everyone should turn up for your march, and we'll see how that goes. So thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you.